I still remember the color of that morning like it was painted into my bones. The sky was a dull, tired gray, the kind that presses low and makes even breathing feel heavy. The kitchen light flickered above me, buzzing softly, and the smell of burnt toast filled the air because my hands were shaking too much to notice the bread had gone black. I was standing there alone, barefoot on cold tiles, holding my phone in my hand, staring at a message that had only 6 words in it, but somehow managed to break something inside me that I didn't even know was still whole. I can't come today. She's upset. For a long moment I didn't move. I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I just stood there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor's car starting outside. The world kept going. It always does. But something in me felt like it had quietly stopped. I read the message again, slower this time, as if maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something kinder. They didn't. My thumb hovered over the screen, wanting to type a response, wanting to say something sharp, something honest, something that would make him feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. Instead, I locked the phone and placed it face down on the counter, as if that could somehow make it disappear. That was the morning I truly understood that my son, the boy I had raised alone with scraped knees and bedtime stories, had chosen his wife over me. Not just that day, not just that moment, but in a way that felt final, like a door closing softly but firmly, without drama, without shouting, without anyone asking if I was ready. My name is Eleanor. I'm not special. I'm not dramatic. I'm just a woman who loved her son with everything she had, and maybe, without realizing it, expected that love to mean something forever. I didn't always think my life would turn out this way. When I was younger, I imagined a noisy house, shared responsibilities, Sunday dinners where someone else did the dishes while I laughed at the table. I imagined growing old with a partner who would squeeze my hand when life got hard. Instead, I learned how to fix leaky faucets myself, how to stretch a paycheck until it begged for mercy, and how to smile through exhaustion because a little boy was watching and learning what strength looked like. My son Daniel was 3 years old when his father walked out. Not in a dramatic storming way. There were no slammed doors or shouted accusations. He packed a single suitcase on a quiet Tuesday afternoon while Daniel napped on the couch with a juice box tipped sideways in his small hand. I remember standing in the doorway, asking him if he was sure, asking him if we could try again, asking him if he realized what he was leaving behind. He didn't look at me when he said he needed to find himself. He kissed Daniel's forehead gently, almost tenderly, and then he was gone. Just like that. I stood there for a long time after the door closed, listening to the echo of his footsteps fade down the hall. Daniel woke up later and asked where Daddy went. I told him Daddy had to go on a trip. That was the first of many small lies I told to protect my son from a truth that felt too heavy for his tiny shoulders. I didn't know then that I was also teaching myself how to carry unbearable weight without letting it show. Raising Daniel alone wasn't heroic. It was messy and exhausting and lonely in ways that people don't talk about. I worked 2 jobs for years, sometimes 3. I learned how to make a dollar stretch, and how to say no to myself, so I could say yes to him. I missed birthdays with friends, declined invitations, and spent most evenings helping with homework at the kitchen table while a pot of cheap pasta boiled on the stove. There were nights I cried quietly in the bathroom after he fell asleep, pressing a towel against my mouth so he wouldn't hear. And there were mornings I woke up before dawn, wiped my face, and did it all over again. Daniel grew up fast. He had to. He learned early how to heat up leftovers, how to fold laundry, how to read my face and know when not to ask for things. But he was also kind and gentle in a way that surprised people. Teachers told me he was polite, thoughtful, always willing to help. Neighbors said he was a good boy. And I would smile and thank them, pride swelling in my chest so big it almost hurt, because every compliment felt like proof that all those sacrifices meant something. When he was 16, he broke his arm playing soccer. I spent the night in a plastic chair beside his hospital bed, my neck stiff and my eyes burning, listening to the steady beep of machines. He woke up groggy and scared at one point, reached out, and grabbed my hand like he used to when he was little. "You're here," he murmured. "Of course I am," I said, trying not to cry. In that moment, it felt like everything I had given up had led to that simple truth. I was here. I always had been. As Daniel grew older, our relationship shifted, as it should. He became more independent, more private. He went to college, moved into his own apartment, started building a life that didn't revolve around me. I was proud of him, truly. But I would be lying if I said I didn't feel the ache of empty rooms and quiet evenings. Still, we talked often. He came by on Sundays. He called me when he needed advice, when his car made a strange noise, when he wasn't sure how to handle something at work. I was still his mother. I still mattered. Then he met her. Her name was Sophie. The first time he brought her home, I made too much food and cleaned the house until it smelled like lemon and bleach. I wanted everything to be perfect, wanted her to like me, wanted to show her that I wasn't the stereotypical overbearing mother people joke about. Sophie was polite, reserved. She smiled often, but her eyes were guarded, like she was always measuring the room, deciding where she fit in it. I tried to make conversation, asked her about her job, her family, her interests. She answered kindly enough, but there was a distance there I couldn't quite bridge. Over time, I noticed small things. The way she would glance at Daniel before answering a question, as if checking for approval. The way she stiffened when I talked about memories from his childhood. The way she corrected him gently but firmly in front of me, like she was establishing something invisible but important. I told myself I was imagining it. I didn't want to be that mother, the one who feels threatened by her son's partner. I reminded myself that Daniel was happy, and that should be enough. When they got engaged, Daniel told me over coffee at my kitchen table, the same table where he'd done homework and eaten cereal and cried over heartbreaks. He looked nervous, like a little boy again. "I hope you're okay with this," he said. I laughed, reached across the table, and squeezed his hand. "Of course I am," I said. And I meant it. I hugged him tightly, feeling that familiar swell of pride. My son was building his own family. That was the goal, wasn't it? The wedding was beautiful. I helped where I could, careful not to overstep. I offered opinions only when asked. I paid for things quietly, anonymously sometimes, because I didn't want Sophie to feel like she owed me anything. On the day itself, I watched Daniel stand at the altar, his face soft and full of love, and I felt tears slide down my cheeks. When he hugged me after the ceremony, he whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you." I held on to that sentence like a lifeline. After they married, things changed slowly at first. Calls became less frequent. Sunday dinners were postponed, then canceled. When I did see Daniel, Sophie was always there, which was natural, of course, but the conversations felt different. More cautious. More filtered. I started to feel like a guest in my own son's life, like I had to watch my words carefully, like there were invisible rules I didn't fully understand. One evening, Daniel called and told me they wouldn't be coming for Christmas dinner after all. Sophie wanted to start their own traditions, he said, his voice apologetic but firm. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time, staring at the small Christmas tree I had already decorated, the ornaments I had collected over decades, each one tied to a memory. I told myself it was okay. Children grow up. Traditions change. But that night, eating dinner alone by the glow of blinking lights, the loneliness felt sharper than usual. The real fracture happened over something small. It always does. Sophie had posted a photo on social media of a dinner she'd cooked, a recipe I had taught Daniel years ago. I commented without thinking, "Looks just like the one we used to make together." It felt harmless to me, nostalgic. Within minutes, Daniel called. His voice was tight. "Sophie's upset," he said. "She feels like you're trying to take credit." I was stunned. "That wasn't my intention," I said. "I was just sharing a memory." There was a pause. "Maybe just don't comment like that anymore," he replied. I apologized. Of course I did. I always did. I told myself it was easier to keep the peace, easier to swallow my feelings than to risk pushing him away. But something inside me began to retreat, slowly, quietly. I started choosing my words more carefully, sharing less, asking fewer questions. I could feel myself shrinking in his presence, and I hated it. The day of the message, the gray morning with the burnt toast, I had been waiting for Daniel to come over. I wasn't sick. It wasn't an emergency. I just needed him. I hadn't said that, of course. I never did. But I had hoped. When the message came, something in me finally cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. It was more like a long, tired sigh. I didn't respond right away. Hours passed. I went about my day in a fog, folding laundry, washing dishes, staring out the window. When he finally called that evening, I answered, but my voice sounded distant even to my own ears. He explained again. Sophie had had a rough day. She needed him. I listened. I understood. I always understood. When he finished, there was an awkward silence. "Are you okay?" he asked. I hesitated. Then I said, "I raised you alone, Daniel. I was always there when you needed me." The words slipped out before I could stop them. His sigh was heavy. "I know, Mom. But things are different now." Different. That word landed between us like a wall. I wanted to argue, to remind him of nights at the hospital, of scraped knees and school projects and sacrifices he would never fully see. But I didn't. I just said, I hope you're happy. And I meant it even though it hurt. After that, the distance grew. Not dramatically. There were no big fights, no ultimatums. Just less. Less contact. Less warmth. Less of everything that had once defined us. I stopped initiating calls. I waited to see if he would notice. Weeks went by. Then months. When we did speak, the conversations were polite, surface level. I felt like a stranger who happened to share his last name. There were nights I replayed my life in my head, wondering where I had gone wrong. Had I loved him too much? Had I leaned on him emotionally without realizing it? Had I failed to prepare him for this shift? Or was this simply the inevitable pain of motherhood? The price you pay for raising someone strong enough to leave you behind? One afternoon, I ran into Sophie at the grocery store. We stood awkwardly by the produce section, surrounded by the smell of apples and disinfectant. She smiled politely. I asked how she was. She told me she was pregnant. The words hit me like a wave. I felt joy, of course, but also grief, sharp and unexpected. A grandchild. A new chapter one wasn't sure I would be part of. I congratulated her, hugged her gently. She thanked me, but there was something guarded in her eyes, something unresolved. When Daniel told me officially, he sounded excited, nervous, happy. I shared his joy. I asked questions. I tried to sound enthusiastic. And I was. But after we hung up, I sat alone on my couch and cried, mourning not the baby, but the version of myself I had imagined in this moment. The grandmother who would be called first, who would help, who would be needed. I didn't know if that woman still existed. Months passed. The baby was born. I met my grandchild once, briefly, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and flowers. I held the tiny bundle in my arms, felt that familiar rush of love, and then handed her back to Sophie, careful not to linger too long. Daniel stood nearby, smiling, proud. I took photos. I told them how beautiful she was. And then I went home alone. Time has a way of softening some edges while sharpening others. As years went by, I learned to live with the distance. I found small joys. Morning walks. A book club. Volunteering at the local library. I built a life that didn't revolve around waiting for my phone to ring. It wasn't easy. There were days the loneliness felt unbearable. But there were also days I felt lighter, freer, less defined by what I had lost. One evening, years later, Daniel showed up at my door unexpectedly. He looked tired. Older. Like the weight of his own choices had finally settled on his shoulders. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one that had witnessed so much of our lives. He told me things I hadn't known. About tension in his marriage. About feeling pulled in different directions. About guilt. He apologized quietly, sincerely. Not for choosing his wife, but for the way he had handled the transition, for the way he had let me fade into the background. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I took a deep breath and said, I never wanted you to choose between us. I just wanted to matter. Tears filled his eyes. He reached across the table, took my hand, just like he had in that hospital room all those years ago. You do, he said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. Our relationship isn't what it once was. It probably never will be. But it's something new. Something more honest. I've learned that loving your child doesn't guarantee a place in their adult life the way you imagined. I've learned that sacrifice doesn't buy immunity from pain. And I've learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go. Not because you're unloved, but because love changes shape. I raised my son alone. I gave him everything I had. And he chose his wife over me. That truth still hurts. But it no longer defines me. Because I am more than a mother waiting to be chosen. I am a woman who survived, who adapted, who learned that love, real love, doesn't always mean being first. Sometimes it means stepping back, finding your own light again, and trusting that what you gave was enough. And on quiet mornings, when the sky is gray and the kitchen light hums softly, I make myself toast, just the way I like it, and remind myself that my story didn't end when my son walked into a new one. It simply changed its rhythm. And I am still here.